I'm Luca Giliberti, contributing writer for Gold Derby, and I'm excited to talk about two new series, HBO Max's Minx and Fox's Welcome to Flatch with Emmy nominee Paul Feig. So, Paul, I would actually like to start with Minx, which you are an executive producer on.
hmm
When Alan Rappaport, who would become the showrunner, pitched this show to you, what made you say, I have to throw my weight behind this?
I just thought the idea was so great. What we call in the business sticky, a very sticky idea that just kind of stays with you, you know. And when I was growing up in Michigan, I was born in 1962 and grew up in the 70s there. And I have such vivid memories of when Playgirl magazine came out. I had two cousins who were older, older girls than myself, and they were kind of obsessed. And it was this whole thing, and my dad was all upset about it, and it was very controversial. And so I remember being very fascinated by that. So when she came to us with this idea, I just thought it's such a perfect idea to do. But then what really sold me on it, because I don't tend to do. I mean, I do R-rated movies, but they're not like sexual in nature. They're more just a lot of swearing and stuff like that. So I was kind of like, I don't know if I want to do something that's like like a sex-based show. But when Ellen pitched it, the characters were so funny. And I realize it's a workplace comedy, and it just happens to be about people who are naked when they work, And so I kind of love that and that's what I love about, when we did the pilot, like the sort of potentially lurid nature of it is just dispelled immediately because the minute Joyce gets to bottom dollar, it's just like a factory, And the naked people are sitting around smoking, like, hey, what's going on? There's nothing kind of, sexual about it. And I just love the characters. I mean, especially of Joyce and Doug, I just thought that there's such funny characters. And the fact that Ellen wanted to make sure that it wasn't about will they, won't they. Like, it's not that kind of thing where there's a sexual tension between them. It's like a boss, like a boss and an employee. And it's just very relatable in that way. And then you've got the added sort of noisiness of, lots of nudity. So you kind of check a lot of boxes.
Absolutely. And there are varying degrees to which executive producers are involved in the projects they sign on to. So what were you able to bring to the table as an executive producer on this show?
Well, I mean, my whole way of producing anything I'm not directing is to put all the work into the beginning, like find the idea, you go like, this idea is great, and then find the person who's doing it. And, fortunately, it usually comes with the person who pitches it. But then you got to kind of make sure, is that person, can they pull this off, or do we have to get them support, or anything like that? And then it's about making sure that the pilot script is right and making sure that all the right people are hired and the casting is right. But, it's really about making sure that everything is in place. Because then I never want to be that producer who's then like writing the set and writing the cuts and writing the scripts. I read everything, obviously, and I'm looking at the dailies and I'm watching cuts. But it's also, the fun for me is going like, oh, I would never have done that way. But I like that, and I've worked on enough stuff where people, it's theirs. And so they try to make, they smother everybody with this idea, even though it wasn't originally their idea. So I just really want to protect that person's vision and make sure that it's seen through.
Mm-hmm. And you sort of touched on this already, but there's been a lot of talk around the show's depiction of full frontal male nudity in large part because there is comparatively less of it in film and television. And while that part of the show is neither sexual or sexy or lurid, as you talked about, exposing yourself like that, regardless of gender, in front of a cast and crew of who knows what is still a daunting task, I have to assume. So how did you ensure, as a producer, that all these actors who came in entered a safe and comforting environment?
Yeah, well, we had the intimacy person there and all that, and also it was when they shot it, and I wasn't there the day they shot this. Actually, the infamous montage from the pilot, the cast shot all their stuff watching it, and then they left, and so it was really just minimal crew and those guys coming in and doing it, just kind of one at a time coming through, and the great thing was these are all guys who knew what they were, the casting thing was like, are you cool with this? So these guys showed up, and what was so funny to me is that they were really into it. I mean, one guy's doing a propeller, and one guy's doing karate, and you go like, they're cool with it, So, I never, in anything I do, make sure that I don't ever make people do anything they don't want to do or aren't even comfortable with. I did an episode of Weeds years and years ago. It was about one storyline was about a porn set,
Hmm.
and and I was like, I'm not gonna like cast actresses who I don't who even might go like, oh, I'll try. Like I said, we got to cast porn stars for this. This is just their job, and it was so great because I was so uncomfortable, and they're like, I was like, okay, we got to do this scene. They're like, oh, cool. I said like, how would you do it? We do this. Great, do it, and then But I never want somebody, even if they go, oh, I'm cool with this, to like if you go like are you cool or are you just looking for you obviously everybody wants to have a job, so it's really making sure that the people who are there are just like bring it on.
Yeah, that's very interesting. And you've also talked about just now how you are always looking for and are interested, in smart and upbeat characters, of which there's no shortage on this show, with Joyce and Doug being prime examples of that. What about these two characters' respective arcs throughout the first season enraptured you the most?
Well, I like that it's about somebody learning the business and then somebody learning how to deal with another perspective on things. It's very much showbiz. I mean, it's somebody comes with a great idea and the person over them has their vision on it. But what I love about Doug is, that character could be gross very easily, and could be played very like sleazy and all that. Doug is just a businessman, and he says it in the pilot. I'm the American dream, and that's what I just kind of really dug about it because he's giving her good advice, but also she's fighting back in a great way too. But they both have to kind of meet in the middle, and it's really exciting halfway through the season when Joyce kicks in, like she starts to get it, because the first number of episodes are really fun because she's just overwhelmed and like, wait, what are you trying to do to my dream? But then when she gets it and starts to, become, not smarter about it, but just more realistic about it, and then finds her way to make it what she wants it to be. It's great, 'cause then you're excited. I mean, there's this montage in one of the later episodes when she's on the radio and she's taking on these
Right.
two gross radio guys, and it's just I get choked up every time I watch it because she suddenly just becomes so empowered and the music's great, during it, and then it's just so it's really fun to see how their power dynamic shifts a little bit, and the big open question at the end of the season, is she going to come back?
Absolutely. And when I spoke to Ophelia Lavibond, who plays Joyce, she very much talked about how she liked that they sort of depend on each other
Yeah.
by the end of the season. That's really such a fascinating aspect of it. And, one of my favorite characters on the show is also Shelley, who I read very much reminded you of your own mother. So before we move on, could you briefly elaborate on that if you're willing to share?
Oh, sure. No, I mean, that Shelley is somebody who seems, kind of uptight, but she's really much smarter than you kind of give her credit for when you first meet her. You kind of go like, oh, she's Joyce's housewife sister or whatever, whatever old terms you want to use for it. And then the ways that she blossoms, first of all, she's just filled with great advice because she's got this whole kind of secret inner life that she's hidden from Joyce because, she's in a marriage that it works, but it's not as exciting as it could be. Like when she's talking about vibrators, I just think that's the
Yeah.
greatest. It's like,
Yeah.
Joyce is like, well, who knows anybody uses this? And she goes, well, actually you do, but the way that she comes into her own, and my mom loved business women. Like she was anytime like she saw somebody, a career woman, she was so excited about that because she wanted to have that. And she worked at my father's store, but she never got that kind of career she wanted. And so seeing how Shelley really gets into what Joyce is doing and is giving her good advice, and is learning and growing and opening up along the way, it really reminded me of my mom sort of when I got into showbiz, and she was just it's what she always kind of wanted. So to see her kind of get this weird confidence and come to my sets and all this stuff, so I think it's just a lovely character. And Lennon, Parnham, who plays it, is just brilliant.
Absolutely. And thank you so much for sharing that. And this is where I'll jump to Welcome to Flatch, on which you have many roles, including executive producer and writer. And the show is based on the BBC sitcom This Country. And you're obviously no stranger to adapting British source material due to The Office, but walk me through the process of taking a story that is originally set in the Cotswolds region in the UK and then relocating it to the fictional town of Flatch, Ohio.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, this country is one of the most brilliant shows ever. I mean, Daisy and Charlie are so great, but it's everything I love about TV comedy. What I think is the best way to do TV comedy, which is the documentary style. Having done The Office and having been on done a bunch of Arrested Developments and all that, it's just there's a freeness to it that I love performers who can improv, who can surprise each other, who just capturing lightning in a bottle. That documentary style. You shoot the whole scene in one take basically because the two cameras are gunning around. So you shoot it multiple times, and you have all these different ways you can do it, and the actors can surprise each other. So I love that about it. But the biggest thing when you're going to adapt, another show that's successful is you want to take all the elements of it that work, but then you have to make it your own. And for me, it seemed like the easiest transition in the world because a small town in the Cotswolds is identical to a small town anywhere in America. Having grown up in a small town, you kind of know a lot of people and everybody knows you, and there's just a kind of a different pace to it. But, it's all about kind of eccentric characters, and when we were first putting it together, everybody's like, well, you're not going to make fun of small towns. It's like, well, no, Jenny and I are from small towns. The last thing we're going to do is make fun of them. We want to have fun with them the way that we did when we lived there, And so, yeah, it's just really kind of, then it's all about cast, because we build off of them. We were writing stuff, but also we get inspired by them. That's the best way to do a TV show. And that was the biggest angst, is how do we find a Charlie and a Daisy, especially Daisy, because she's so specific. And Jenny and I were both kind of, when we sold the show and everything, it's like, we might not be able to find this person because it's so specific. But it was Greg Lubin, our associate producer, who works in my company, and he came to me one day. He said, like, I think I found her. He goes, go on Twitter and look up Holmes, and I pull up Holmes, and she just does these hilarious videos in her car, just talking to the thing as different characters, and it's like, that's her. And honestly, she was the only person, like nobody else came close. So it was her. And then we found Sam, who was just great. And they gelled so much. And then obviously we filled out the rest of the cast with amazing people.
Yeah, absolutely. That's very fascinating. Again, thank you for sharing. And what strikes me as an observer as one of the most difficult tasks is then converting British humor to American humor. But obviously, you have a ton of experience in comedy. So talk a bit about the specifics of establishing the humor on this show, and to what extent you then drew on your Midwestern upbringing for that process.
Yeah, I mean, the biggest difference I've found between British humor and American humor is British audiences like their comedy a little meaner. Like they can really enjoy a unlikable lead character and kind of enjoy their downfall. I mean, we have this on The Office, obviously Ricky Gervais's character is pretty unlikable in a hilarious way. And so the first 6 episodes of The Office, Steve Carell kind of played it that way too. And American audience was like, no, so it was only after he did 40-Year-Old Virgin that we all kind of went like, oh, he needs to be kind of more, at least you have to be able to root for the guy, Right. And so that's what I found with this. But so it's really, but then beyond that, just sort of the expectation of the audience of why do I want to care about this person? The humor isn't really that different because it's all, the only, other than that difference, comedy tends to be referential. And so it's really just like, you just have to change the references to being American references. But if it's all about human interaction and human behavior and human relations, that's the same everywhere. I mean, people, have their likes and dislikes and anger, and conflict and all that the same everywhere on other planets, I'm sure too.
Absolutely, and I'd ask that because you have talked about several times how having worked on The Office made you realize that American audiences aren't necessarily fond of quote unquote unlikable or irredeemable characters. Why do you think there is that difference at all?
Well, I think we're still a very young country, and we're a very optimistic country. Even though sometimes it feels not that way. But we really are. We are a teenage country, and so that there's this kind of lovely optimism that we have. Whereas you get into an older country who's been through a lot, they're kind of, they like to take down like sacred cows, and like love to see a boar like taken down, but we like that, but if they're the villain, we enjoy that. We want to really root for the person that takes them down versus kind of enjoy our hero being a shithead being knocked down, so yeah, but I kind of love that about American audiences. I think it's lovely. And, it's with my movies, it's the same thing. I was like, I want everything to be good natured, didn't get super dark, get really ugly at some point, but the message has to be people are great. You're going to get by. You can win. You can beat the system occasionally, and but also being realistic at the same time.
Oh yeah, very fascinating perspective. And what I really liked about this show is, while yes, there does aim for a specific type of humor, I would say the characters are still very much distinctive. For example, Kelly and Shrub are very different from Big Mandy, who is different from Cheryl, who is different from Father Joe, and so on. So how did you and your fellow writers ensure that the humor derives from the characters and isn't as opposed to being something that is imposed on them, if that makes sense?
Yeah, well, no, totally. I mean, it really, again, it all comes from the casting, because once when we're casting, we're kind of writing at the same time, honestly, because you're going like, oh, Kelly and Shrub are a certain type. They're sort of the teenagers, that are kind of, they're the Bart Simpsons of this world, but then you go, okay, so we need to balance that. So like, Mickey, their friend, needs to be kind of, a weirdo, like nerdy in a way that they're kind of like, oh, he's so, weird, but also he's kind of smarter than them. So you got that mix. And then Father Joe is this father figure, but obviously if he's doesn't have any foibles, he's not interesting. So it's gonna, when Sean came to us wanting to do the role, we were like, really? It was like, I couldn't even believe it. But he's so funny, but he brings this sort of like optimistic view, which is, the same way that the father was on, the priest was on the original show. Mm-hmm. But then we were able to bring on this whole extra level of kind of this, he and Cheryl used to date, and then you get Aya Cash, who brings in this kind of crazy kind of optimism, but also sadness about her. And she's trying to get by, but she's enthusiastic, but she's also being beaten down. And then Big Mandy, played by the amazing Crystal, who just brings in this confidence. So it's really a good show, a good ensemble is everybody's got a different personality type that you can use. The fact that Big Mandy is, takes over eventually and becomes Father Joe's assistant because she sees he's getting bullied by blind Billy. It's all those things that then just becomes for us like, okay, this storyline. And once you have a storyline, you're like, okay, how are these people all going to affect it? And it really, the hardest part is about making the scripts come down to time and the shows come down to time, because we get so much good material out of them that we really suffer through the final edit, because it's like, oh no, we got to lose that and lose that.
Oh no. I can absolutely imagine. I have to say, one of the funniest moments, at least early on, was when it's in the first episode when Kelly pretends like she's lifting weights. I believe it's with like a can, and she has the gloves on. She has the gloves on and everything. That was just absolutely hilarious. Before we slowly wrap things up, I do have to mention, of course, that you also directed the first 3 episodes of the series. What was important to you as you were establishing the show's signature look and aesthetic, or tone and aesthetic?
Well, I want to, I'm very religious about that docu-comedy style. And I want to make sure that it's done right, because I've seen other things and been in situations where they think they're doing it and they're not doing it right, where it's too set up and it's trying to be too filmic. And, first thing is just getting the right crew. And, so Shauna Hagen, who came on as our DP, she came from Survivor. And, and that's when Greg Daniels put together The Office, he did the same thing. He got, Randall Einhorn and Matt Sohn, who were cameramen on Survivor. So they know how to do that reality thing. It's not people faking it. It's people who know how to do that. So then we just, I want to set up a situation where there's no blocking or anything. You go like, okay, here's the set, you guys go in, you do it, we're going to shoot it, and I want to impose that looseness on it, because if people come in, when we were doing The Office, sometimes, and I was co-exec producing one year, like some directors would come in and really try to control it. Like the camera's like, okay, now you pull it and go, and it's like, no, don't do that. Like, let them find it. And then once they're going, then you're like, what, actually just stay wide for this, because I think we need that, or, or pushing on that, because I think it'll be funny. But we follow their lead. And so I'm really trying to set a tone that says, don't be control freaks, let this happen because it's all about these performers, and so yeah, so it was really fun. And then I got to write 2 episodes too, so that was
Exactly. Yeah, and they're amazing performers, truly. And the way they just deliver the comedy, it's just such a joy to watch.
yeah, they're effortless. I mean, it's really really fun.
Absolutely. And on a final note, congratulations are in order because both Minx and Welcome to Flatch, which also premiered on the same day, I should say, March 17th,
Yes. Yes.
they were both renewed for a second season now. So what are you most looking forward to exploring or hoping to explore in the second seasons of these shows?
These characters, I mean, it's all about the characters and just their inner relationships. I mean, on Minx, I'm very excited to see how the magazine's going to go, how Joyce is going to handle this newfound fame, and how she's going to take it to the next level, and how her relationship with Doug is going to go, and how all the the supporting people around it, where Bambi is going to find her confidence and all that. So that's like excitement of like, oh, that they're moving towards a goal of success, and that's exciting. And for Flatch, it's really, they're just kind of moving towards trying to all be happy, and keep their lives just sort of normal. And that's just really fun. Minx is about big storylines and
Yeah.
Flatch is about small storylines. And I love both of those. But I really love writing for Flatch because I can just pull out any dumb thing I did as a kid, and Kelly and Shrub would do it. So I'm very excited to write a haunted house episode because my friends and I used to put on haunted houses all the time, and they were terrible. So I'm pretty sure Kelly and Shrub are going to put on a haunted house this season.
Well, I'm certainly looking forward to watching both seasons, and now I'm looking forward to seeing the Haunting House episode. I'm expecting it now. Thank you so much for taking the time to speak about these two shows today, Paul. It was such a pleasure.
My pleasure. Thank you, Luca. Really great talking to you.